Why was there a woman in here? Jin Mu-Won is confused. Was this girl a criminal? What should Jin Mu-Won do now? Wait, he thinks that he needs to check if she is alive or not. She was still breathing. Why was this happening to him? He then carries the girl and quickly moves her inside his room. He sees a wound in her body. It looked like she got attacked by some deadly poison chi. He then remembers that he has an internal protection antidote. But it was the only one that he had left. He was making a big sacrifice giving her the medicine that Mr. Huang had given him. He sighs, sees the woman and gives her the medicine. He then uses acupuncture and stops the bleeding. He then questions who that girl is and where she had come from. Jin kept getting more and more unwanted guests. After 3 days, the girl opens her eyes. She suddenly wakes up and feels the pain in her body. She then checks her wound and questions what happens. Who had healed her? Jin sees that she wakes up and tells her that he is making porridge. She then remembers that she got wounded and hid in an abandoned palace. Then a boy comes, and she puts the knife in him and asks him questions, and then she collapsed from the wound. But she was confused. Why did that man healed her? Jin then comes to her with porridge and tells her that she has woken up after 3 days. But why did someone like him heal him? Jin asks her if she is an assassin sent to kill him or just a passerby on the verge of death. But he could not stand the sight of someone dying in front of him, so he could not just leave her to die. At the very least, he never wanted to see someone die in the sect again. The girl thinks that he does not seem to have any ill intention, and she could also not detect any chi from him. So, the girl thinks if she is doing this out goodwill. Jin then tells her to eat as he is not going to feed her like he did for the past 3 days. She then looks irritated and tells him that she will stay there until she recovers. Jin then looks at her and says, deciding that on her own. Oh my God. He then asks her what her name is. She is startled and asks why he needs her name. Jin is irritated by her and says not only he healed her but also let her eat and sleep in his house, and she had also decided to live there until she recovers, so at least he could ask for was her name. She then tells him that her name is Un-Ha-Seol. Jin then tells her that there are some clothes if she wants to change and some in the storage room that might last some couple of months. Saying that he will be in the building next door if she needs anything. Jin leaves. Un then lets her guard down. She was still hurt. She thinks that she will need to first recover her internal energy and draw out the poison slowly. She remembers his name as Jin Mu-Won, but why was he going out of his way for her? Did not he know who she was? Jin thinks that judging by the wound alone, she was no ordinary girl. All of this was a big risk on him as he was uncertain who was she and where was he from. But the fact he willingly let her stay there, was he that lonely? He smiles and thinks that Un-Ha-Seol was a pretty name. The repair work was being done in the building. Si was working whereas Captain Zhang was fast asleep after eating. Jin was worried about the girl as she had not left the house for 3 days again. Jin thinks if he should check on her. Inside, Un was only able to recover half of her internal energy. Under normal circumstances she could need to have full recovery to attempt to draw the poison out of her body, but there was no time as the most dangerous poison was inside her body. She then thinks of the medicine that Jin had used. She had no idea what it was, but since the medicinal properties are starting to dwindle, it seemed that the effect of that antidote was almost gone. It was getting harder for her to counteract the poison. It was dangerous, but she would need to draw out the rest of the poison with whatever internal energy she had recovered. She then focuses on it, but the poison spreads and she falls down. Was this her end? She did not even get a chance to thank Jin properly. A masked man then appears out of nowhere. He then uses his technique to stop the poison and tells her to focus and utilize her internal energy just a little bit more, and he tried to heal her. He then tells her to channel the chi towards her fingers, and the poison slowly drips out of her fingers. The poison had been removed. He made it just in time. 1 second late and she could have died. His name was Sarong. He was both hers and her master's purpose. He asks for an apology for being late. He then asks Un how she was feeling. She tells him she was fine and asks him where he had gone after the ambush on them. He tells her that he was also injured and had been hiding. He recently located Un and came to her as fast as he could. Un then asked why he did not go to the master first. Sarung then tells her that the master is not someone they needed to worry about, and his priority now was to help Un recover. Sarung says that taking shelter in the Northern Sect was a smart choice, as the ones hunting them would have a hard time believing that she was here in the first place. So, he tells her to stay there a bit longer while he finds the master. He then says that he will return with the master's order. Jin Mu-Won is practicing blacksmithing, murmuring something. He was saying the source of the fist energy is promised with a shadow. The second energy shall change the Ryle, and the 10,000 shall become one as the light covers the world. I alone shall hold one shadow. The source of all things can only be inhabited by one energy, however, a shadow shall always loom. This second energy shall change the way things are governed, ultimately causing all things to become one. The light may envelop the world, but I shall only encompass the one true shadow. Like the void of the perpetual night may stretch across the sky eternally. The internal shadow shall be the same, as it shall exist somewhere in that darkness. He then tries sensing the entire area. These were some of the teachings from the gathering of the 10,000 shadows, internal shadow. The first sect leader, Buk Jin, who was a vagabond, a genius swordsman who was able to create these martial arts after many years of wandering. Because the nature of this martial arts was shrouded in secrecy and darkness. Just by looking at Jin Mu-Won alone, most martial artists will have a hard time telling if he had built up any internal energy and learned any martial arts. Even after being passed down for 4 generations, the gathering of the 10,000 shadows was never able to reach its full potential and remains unfinished work. This is the martial arts Jin Mu-Won was currently learning. If he had the choice of gathering 10,000 swords or not, he would have chosen the later. However, since the Central Heavenly Alliance did take all of the usable martial arts and kept strict watch on him, he had no other choice left. After practicing for a while, he stops as he gets hungry. It was cold and snowing outside. Un comes out and sees the Northern Heavenly Sect. Jin sees her outside and tells her that she looks a lot better. She had not come out for the past few days, so he was beginning to think that if something had happened to her. He invited her over to eat if she was hungry. She then thinks and follows him without saying anything. She then thanks Jin for everything that he had done. Jin asks why. She tells him that it was because of him that she survived. He tells it was no problem and tells her to eat as her stomach was growing. Jin then starts eating, stating that the food is not poisoned, and she did not need to worry. Un asks why Jin has not asked anything about her. Jin asks like what? Un tells like her who she is. Jin says that he does not need to know that. He just thinks that it is best that he does not know, because if he found out who she was, he had a gut feeling that he would not be able to enjoy his time with her anymore. Un says if Jin was stupid. He tells her to stop asking questions and eat, as he can hear her stomach growling. Jin is on the roof again. He could feel his body starting to change. There was one more secret within the wall of the 10,000 shadows. It was time for him to learn the Blade of Eternal Darkness, a mysterious sword technique that was created with the sole purpose to kill. He has been learning the basics of the swordsmanship so that he could properly utilize this sword technique. He then, while blacksmithing, learns the sword technique. On the other hand, Un is meditating and gathering chi. While blacksmithing, suddenly Un comes in front of Jin and Jin is startled. Un then questions if Jin was just good at concentrating or if his senses were dull, but she had been sitting there for quite a while now. She then tells that she is hungry and asks for food. This angers Jin and he tells Eun that it had been 3 years and how could she be so shameless. Eun just ignores the scolding and asks for food. Jin questions why he was doing that for just some girl. Eun thinks that something about Jin does not make sense. Not only did the descendant of the Heavenly Sect not seem to know martial arts, but he did not even have the basic knowledge for it and just wasting his time blacksmithing. Jin falls, stands up and acts like nothing happened. He then tells Eun to let's go and eat. Eun then stops thinking and follows him. They both start eating. They fight a little, play a little and start eating. Outside, the guests who were about to come to the sect had arrived. Central Heavenly Alliance for Dead Heaven's Crimson King's demonic might Jin Mu-Won's daughter Suwa age 14 and his son Jin Won-Lee age 19. Central Heavenly Alliance Seo-mun family seeker of knowledge Seo-munwa's granddaughter Hyrian age 20. The General Ma-kun Pyeong shouts if anyone was in the sect. The mercenary group then come running outside, they bow to them and introduce them. Mok then asks if their rooms have been prepared. Jang says that he prepared the rooms himself and offered to escort them. One of the escorts sees Seo Musang. He says that his name was Yeepul. Seo then turns his head like he does not know him. They then go inside. Seo Munwa says that it was quite unfortunate that the Northern Heavenly Sect was now in ruins. Jin Won-Lee says that it is how the world functions. If you lose your strength, then you die. He says that a similar good example was hunting dogs after the hunt served no purpose. Suwa says to her brother that his choice of words was very cruel. On the other side, Eun was complaining about why they were always eating meat and if they didn't have other side dishes. Jin then sees that a group of people were coming his way. They see them and stop. Jang and Seo Musang were startled. They all look at Jin. Jin also looks at them. Eun thinks was nervous of the unfamiliar people, she could not sense them coming, she had gotten dull and was getting too lax. She then tells herself not to let her guard down. Jin Won-Lee introduces himself, his sitter and Hyrian to Jin. Jin then greets them and introduces himself and tells them that Eun is his distant cousin. Jang is furious at Seo Musang for not knowing and checking about the girl. Seo Musang apologized and Jang tells him to find out who she was by tomorrow. Shim then asks Jin if he knows them. Jin says that he has heard stories about them before. Shim then insulting tells that Jin knows his name and tries to skip the formalities. Seo Munwa then tells Shim to be more respectful. Jang then thinks that he will teach Jin a lesson for bringing an outsider without his permission. He then shows the lords their way saying they have prepared nice rooms for them. Eun thinks that Jin was not dumb as she thought and guesses there are times when he acts that way, being able to lie without even blinking once. She finds Jin intriguing. But was not Jin the owner, then why was that man acting like it was his place, she thought. It is nighttime. Shim is talking to General Mok. He tells him that he had come there in order to relish the former glory of the Northern Heavenly Sect, but the place was more pathetic than he had thought. This confuses the general. Shim then continues speaking. He says that the peace that is perceived in the mainlands was merely an illusion created by the old geezers of the Central Heavenly Alliance. They did not want the system that they built to be destroyed. If they could, they would want to live forever in order to reap the benefit of this corruption that they had put into place. Mok then says that he would do whatever he can to assist the four dead heavens. Shim tells him that he needs to wait a bit more until he can inherit the four dead heavens. However, he did not plan to wait long and make the sect his start of his foundation. But something was bothering him. Jin was blacksmithing. Suddenly, he hears a voice that startled him. Jin had been sensing the area the whole time. How had he not detected him at all? Shim tells Jin that he was doing a pretty good job withstanding the heat inside the forge without any chi. He says that the place was too dull. He takes a blade and asks him how he was able to live in a place like that. Jin says nothing. Looking at the blade, he says it was of nice quality and sells for a high price in the mainlands. Shim then points the sword to Jin, saying that Jin was just playing dumb, pretending not to know any martial arts, because if he had truly given up he would not be alive for this long. Jin is confused. What was Shim trying to do? Should he fight? He could not reveal his strength yet. Everything he had been enduring will be meaningless if fights. Jin did not know what to do. Shim then attacks Jin. Jin senses the killing intent. He then clenches his fist. He was releasing a ferocious aura. This startled Shim.
Thank you for joining us in this recap journey. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button. Comment if you have suggestions, want more of the series. Don't forget to share it with your friends. Do subscribe if you want more similar content. This is Universe Nexus, your passport to the immersive realms of anime and manga.